One, that they erode government's tax revenue base significantly. We're speaking to a large group of Inland Revenue officers, I'm sure you'll all agree. Secondly, they create significant differences in the business environment faced by different segments of the business community. And the BOI enterprises became a highly favored group, getting everything from tax holidays, concessionary tax periods, customs duty exemptions, concessionary land, and so on. So what is the challenge? On one hand, we have the fiscal pressures, the need to raise more revenue, streamline tax incentives because of the revenue pressure, but at the same time, and we can't forget this, we are only just over 2 years after the war, we need to preserve the attractiveness of Sri Lanka as an FDI destination in order to keep the rate of investment high. So policy circles are divided on how to handle this. Some insist on the continued need to maintain tax holidays and other tax-based incentives to keep FDI high, at least at the moment, while others argue that, like Ms. Mudlige said, there are various other factors, stable government, security situation, and so on, and those are all favorable for Sri Lanka, and therefore we can do away with incentives or use other forms of incentives that put less pressure on revenues. So those are the two competing sides that have to be debated. A quick background, Dr. Kalagama went through this, so I won't spend too much time. Following reform and liberalization in 1977, FDI was promoted, first under the Greater Colombo Economic Commission along with FIAC, but in that period, due to various regulatory issues, macro issues, and also, of course, the Northeast conflict, we couldn't really escalate foreign direct investment as fast. Much of the FDI was limited to the free trade zones. But as time went on, 1989, 1990, FDI promotion gained a new impetus, another wave of reforms came in, and FDI was recognized as essential to fast-track capital accumulation and to improve technological capacities and skills. And then we moved on to the setting up of the BOI. And that was part of a much broader set of proposals under the Investment Promotion Act, Industrial Policy Statement, and then that became an act, Industrial Promotion Act. Not only foreign companies, then local companies were also given BOI status. And although in the initial period, BOI was intended as a one-stop shop for all foreign investment approvals, in the initial period this was largely achieved, but since then this has deteriorated. New project applicants often have to approach several regulatory bodies to get specific approvals. So that's a quick take on the institutional background to investment promotion and tax incentives. Recent FDI performance, it may be that Dr. Samarapuli has some more updated numbers, but this is what I have at the moment. You can see 2004, $200 million US, then fared quite well in 2008, dipped again 2009 and 10. Some wondering why that was. Of course, there was the global downturn also, but then post-war Sri Lanka FDI is set to improve. The projections are that in 2011, this year, it's projected at 1 billion. The BOI and the government is targeting 1 billion. As I understand, I think in quarter one it was 236 million that has already come in. And by 2015, a fairly ambitious target of 2.5 billion US dollars in FDI. While Sri Lanka attracted an annual average FDI of about 500 million US dollars, about 1.5% of GDP during the last decade or so, East Asian countries, many countries which Sri Lanka is now trying to emulate their development experience, those countries attracted FDI flows in excess of 5 billion US dollars annually, close to 5% of their GDP. So that is sort of what we need to be looking at if we're trying to emulate that development experience, benchmark ourselves against some of those East Asian countries. Now, a key issue, remember I mentioned earlier this issue of are tax incentives effective, should we do away with them? A first step is to find out or to ask ourselves what are the costs versus benefits, and this was a challenge that was also given to the Commission at that time. And there are several issues with this, and you will realize that I have no answer. But I'll go through some of the thinking on this. While a general description of the tax types of benefits that arise from additional investment as a result of tax incentives can be provided, for example, the fact that it adds to the country's capital base, creates jobs, transfers skills, knowledge and technology, helps lagging regions grow. Even though a general description can be given, it's very difficult to fully estimate the benefits with any degree of certainty. Sometimes the benefits are hard to quantify, and at times accrues to parties other than the firm concerned, spillover benefits. And we all know how difficult it is to sometimes quantify these spillover benefits that don't occur to maybe the company concerned directly. Also, estimating the cost of having granted an incentive can be misleading because we don't have a counterfactual. For example, how can you assume that a certain investment would have taken place and generated that same amount of jobs, had that element of growth spurt in that area, if that tax incentive wasn't given? So it's very hard to imagine what would the cost of that incentive be, because you can't assume that the company that was given that incentive would have come in anyway. So that's another issue in measuring this cost versus benefits. Of course, a general overview of some of the benefits could be in terms of job creation. BOI projects both inside and outside zones employ nearly 260,000 people, probably more. There are estimates that 65% of the country's total exports in general and 86% of the country's industrial exports in particular originated from BOI projects. So that's a fairly significant benefit to look at. In terms of costs, if we try to, a proxy for cost to be the number of years of tax holidays granted, if you take a sample of about 734 Section 17 BOI projects, the majority were granted tax holiday periods of 4 to 5 years, followed by those 8 to 10 years and 1 to 3 years. Only about 16 projects had been granted 11 to 15 year tax holidays, while around 8 had been granted more than 15 years. But what is impossible to assess is whether the performance of these BOI projects would have been achieved or not to this level in the absence of tax incentives. So that's why I'm saying it's very hard to really conduct a cost-benefit analysis, and I think this is an important message also. It's easy to say we must look at the cost versus benefits of tax incentives before granting them. It's not as easy as we think, and that's important to remember. But having said that, some element of cost-benefit analysis needs to be done at the approval stage, and that's something we noticed that rigor in which investments are approved may have watered down over time, whereas earlier during the GCC period, of course, there were fewer investments coming on a daily basis, so it must have been easier. But doing very rigorous analysis to see what is this company, what is their record, using online databases like Dun & Bradstreet to see how credible they are, also, trying to get a more investment recommendation committee to look at how good the investment is and the benefit to the country and so on, are some things that should be looked at the pre-approval stage. And also follow up with things like, with instruments like the Statement of Revenue Foregone that India has introduced, where you try and see how much of these tax incentives, how much of cost has been incurred to the exchequer. Right, moving from that, it is then, assuming it's hard to do real cost-benefit analysis, a first step would be trying to at least tighten the existing investment incentives regime, tax incentives regime. I think a first step, important step has been achieved after a lot of deliberation on this from the budget last year, where everything is now brought under a more coherent regime. Earlier, under the legal framework on tax incentives and holidays, some tax holiday provisions were written into the Inland Revenue Act, whereas the BOI Act superseded many of those and offered incentives over and beyond. This dichotomous structure created difficulties, both in terms of monitoring of incentives. Also, as Inland Revenue officers, you might agree, you're not in charge of granting the incentives. BOI is maybe granting the incentives. You have no incentive yourself to go and chase up these enterprises to make sure they're paying tax. I also reduced clarity and certainty for tax authorities as well as prospective investors. But since Budget 2011, since announced in November last year, all income tax holidays for investment by and large are brought under the Inland Revenue provisions, but customs duty exemptions continue under the BOI regime. Larger projects, as the Honourable Minister mentioned this morning, to be considered under the Strategic SDP, Strategic Development Projects Act. So that is something that has been achieved in terms of tightening. I'll also give a couple of thoughts, maybe some ideas, maybe these are already under consideration and we can debate it with both practitioners and also investment promotion officers. A couple of ideas, I'll give maybe 2 or 3. One, in terms of tightening, is setting a minimum threshold of foreign capital in these BOI registered FDI projects. At the very inception of the BOI, a key criterion for eligibility of generous tax incentives was that the entire cost of the project should be funded from abroad. Of course, this was since relaxed to make way for more investment. Maybe that this practice has to be revisited. I'm not saying only granted to those who bring in 100% foreign capital, but maybe some differentiation. It has also been contended that certain foreign entrants receiving BOI approval and the incentives that accompanied, in fact, raised much of this funding requirements from domestic commercial banks through their foreign currency borrowing units and so on. And this, I mean, if a key part of FDI is to bridge the savings investment gap domestically, the key part of FDI would be to bring in new capital. So if much of that is being raised here, it begs the question how much of an incentive, tax incentive should be granted. So maybe can we consider the degree of incentive depending on the degree of foreign capital that is brought into a certain project. At the inception, of course, that could change during the lifetime of the project, but at least at the inception. Another idea to consider could be time-bound incentives. Now we have incentives for particular thrust sectors and particular regions, lagging regions. But in keeping with the government's stated policy direction, there is an immediate need to promote private investment into lagging regions and also for certain specific sectors. For example, fisheries, processing, canning, cool rooms, ice plants, logistics, and so on. Also tourism, agro-industries, knowledge-based industries, particularly in lagging regions. So, given that this needs to happen fast, much of this hasn't happened as fast as we would have expected or would have liked, a possible tool could be to adopt more time-bound tax incentives. For example, what was done in agriculture, you grant a 5-year tax holiday for any agro or fishery industry project in the particular district, but commencing commercial operations before 2013 or 2014. So you have a specific window in which this concessionary period is available in the hope that it will push the private sector to, okay, we need to invest in this now and make use of this window. But it might also help the government sort of guide private sector potential investors into what kind of sectors need to be promoted and what kind of areas. The third would be also in terms of this monitoring of how BOI projects perform, foreign projects perform in terms of the promises that they made at the start, at the inception. There is a need for more systematic and frequent monitoring. There could be that the generous tax incentive of 10 years was given on the promise at signing of the agreement that maybe 500 employees are employed. So some mechanism of monitoring this, maybe through a certificate scheme where every 3 years you go and check with these companies and see are they adhering to the things they signed on to at the start, and if not, give notice or reduce the tax incentive or suspend it or something. And I know there's a scheme that kind of monitoring, but maybe a more regular and systematic, because I think now it's on a randomized basis. Next section that's on tightening, another would be there's this discussion about moving away from your traditional blanket tax holidays and concessionary tax rates to other tools, and this comes in a lot of the literature that we read, particularly those in this field of tax advisory and accountants would be able to tell us more about the nitty-gritty on how these would operate and the pros and cons. But maybe can we consider new tools like accelerated depreciation, investment allowances, investment tax credits? Where accelerated depreciation would be where firms are allowed to write off capital costs over a much shorter period of time at the inception. And investment allowances and investment tax credits would be that firms are allowed to claim deductions on their dues depending on the cost of the capital that qualifies. So these are not your blanket tax holidays and concessionary tax rates, but a little more targeted. And the argument is that upfront tax incentives like these can help address cash flow problems, particularly at the startup phase. Investment tax credits and immediate and full expensing of capital costs are often advocated as an efficient form of investment incentives in that they reward new capital purchases. And there are a few more details on that. I won't go into it in this slide. It's in the printout, but I think maybe that's something for discussion, whether we can move to these types of tax incentives and what are the pros and cons of these accelerated depreciation and investment tax credits, approved investment relief, and so on. Because the international experience seems to be that tax holidays seem to have a more pronounced effect in attracting footloose short-term investment that may well leave the host country, may leave Sri Lanka at the end of their tax holiday period. Or it might encourage them to just set up a new company to take advantage of a new tax holiday. Whereas other types of incentives that I mentioned could be that they incentivize more longer term and investment in continuous new capital formation. So Buddhika will take over a few slides on the international view and I'll come back to give some wrapping up comments.